There is a photograph hanging on the wall of a dead man's house, and almost nobody who watches Rick and Morty has stopped to ask why it cannot possibly exist. The dead man is Bird Person. The house is the one Rick visits in his memories, and the photograph shows a younger Rick Sanchez holding up a baby. The baby has the unmistakable shape of a Morty, a grandson, Rick beaming, holding a grandchild in his arms during a stretch of his life when, according to everything the show has told us, he had no grandchild at all. He had abandoned his daughter when she was small. He was hunting the man who murdered his wife. He was alone, drunk, and decades away from ever knocking on the Smith family's door. So who is the baby? When was the photo taken? Which Rick is that? And which Morty? And what happened to them? The show put that image on screen, let the camera rest on it just long enough for the sharp-eyed to notice, and then it moved on and never spoke of it again. That is the thing about this show. It looks like chaos. Burps and portals, and a talking cat that you are begged not to think about. Gags fired off so fast that the surface of it reads as pure anarchy. A show that seems to make things up as it goes and dares you to take any of it seriously. But underneath the chaos is a machine that remembers everything. It plants seeds across years of episodes, references a throwaway line from 4 seasons ago like it was load-bearing all along, and builds an emotional architecture so deliberate that fans have spent a decade mapping it. And then, having built all that careful continuity, it refuses to water about half of the seeds it planted. It leaves them in the ground, visible, deliberate, unresolved, knowing exactly what it is doing. Some of these unanswered questions are jokes the writers forgot. Some are deliberate landmines left for the obsessive. And a few of them, once you actually sit with the evidence, suggest a version of this story far colder and far sadder than the comedy ever lets on. For the next 2 hours, we are going to walk through the ones that never got answered. Not animation goofs, not nitpicks. Real, load-bearing questions that the show raised on purpose and then walked away from. Some of them have fan answers so well supported that the writers themselves have had to respond. Some of them have no answer at all, and the not knowing is the point. Get comfortable, we are going somewhere strange. Start with the wound at the center of everything. Rick Sanchez is the smartest man in the universe, and the smartest man in the universe spends his life pretending he does not care about a single thing in it. We are told why, and eventually we are shown why, in a wordless flashback scored like a film noir. A young Rick happy, in a garage with his wife Diane and his small daughter Beth. Another Rick arrives from another reality and offers him the secret to traveling between worlds. Our Rick says no. He has everything he wants right here, and so the visiting Rick, insulted or threatened or simply bored, drops a bomb that kills Diane and little Beth where they stand. That is the origin. That is the engine. Everything Rick becomes afterward, the drinking, the nihilism, the multiverse-hopping rampage, the decades hunting one specific Rick across infinite realities, all of it pours out of that single morning in the garage. The show treats it as the most important event in its entire mythology. And here is the question nobody can answer. Was any of it true? Because the first time we see this story, Rick himself tells us it is fake. He is imprisoned by the Galactic Federation, hooked up to a machine that reads memories, and he feeds the machine an origin story, a garage, a dead family, a vow of revenge. And then, after the reveal, Rick turns to the camera in his own head and says the whole thing was a fabrication, a virus he uploaded to fry the Federation's equipment. The 3 lines of math that supposedly invented portal travel were never math at all. The grieving widower was a performance. Seasons later, the show takes it back. We learn the origin was mostly true after all. Diane and Beth really did die. Rick really did spend decades hunting their killer. The fake-out was itself a fake-out. But notice what that does. It means the show has now told us, on the record, that Rick is capable of constructing a flawless emotional origin story, complete with a dead wife and a murdered child, purely as a weapon. He did it once to escape a prison. We watched him do it, we believed it. And the only reason we now think the second version is real is that the show told us so, using the exact same flashback machinery that lied to us the first time. So which is it? Is the dead family the true Rick, the soft center under all the armor? Or is the grieving Rick just the most convincing mask he owns, the one he can put on so completely that even he forgets it is a mask? The show wants you to feel the tragedy. It also went out of its way to teach you that this exact tragedy is the one thing Rick is willing to forge. It never reconciles those two facts. It just lets them sit in the same room staring at each other for years. And the show knows exactly what it is doing, because it built the same uncertainty into the smallest details and the largest. Rick is a man whose enemy taunted him, with his dying breath, that he might be a clone. A man whose daughter cannot prove she is not a copy. A man whose catchphrase is a hidden cry for help, that he has disguised as a joke so thoroughly that no one hears it. Everything about Rick is double. Everything means two things at once, the surface thing and the buried thing. And the show has trained you to never be sure which one you are looking at. That is not sloppiness. That is the most consistent creative choice the show has ever made. It has decided, deliberately, that you will never get to know whether the man at the center of it is a grieving widower hiding behind a monster or a monster hiding behind a grieving widower, and it has decided this because Rick himself does not know, and a show honest about a man like that cannot know either. And it gets worse when you bring back the photograph. Diane died when Beth was a little girl. Rick left. The next time he is in Beth's life, she is a grown woman with children of her own, and he shows up out of nowhere to move into the garage. There is supposed to be a 30-year hole in the middle there, a long, cold stretch of a man with no family, killing his way across the multiverse. So the photo of young Rick holding a baby grandson breaks the timeline in half. If Rick was estranged and alone, there was no grandchild to hold. If there was a grandchild to hold, then somewhere in Rick's past there is an entire family, an entire Beth who grew up with her father in her life, an entire Morty, and we have never met any of them and never been told what happened to them. And it is not the only impossible image the show has hidden in plain sight. Buried inside Birdperson's memories is a version of Rick from his 30s, long-haired, sharp, fully himself, a Rick who existed in a stretch of time the official origin says should have been nothing but a grieving widower hunting a killer across realities. Memory Rick, the show calls him, a whole functioning person living in a window of Rick's life that the tragedy supposedly hollowed out. The grief origin says one thing about those decades. The memories tucked into other characters say something else. The show keeps showing us a Rick who had friends, a life, even something like happiness. During the exact years his official story claims he was a ghost driven only by revenge. Both cannot be fully true. The show presents both and reconciles neither. The fan theories run in every direction. Maybe it is a different Rick from a different dimension, whose memory got mixed into the montage. Maybe Rick has done this before, attached himself to a daughter, raised a grandson, and then lost them or left them, and the family we follow is simply the latest in a series. Maybe the photo is a lie too, planted by Birdperson, or by Rick himself as part of some longer game. The show has never picked one. It put a grandfather and a grandchild on a dead man's wall, and let you do the math, knowing the math does not close. The cruelest reading is the simplest. Rick has lost a family before, maybe more than once. And the reason he holds the current Beth and the current Morty at arm's length, the reason he sabotages every moment of closeness right as it threatens to mean something, is not that he does not love them. It is that he has done this exact thing before and watched it end, and he is bracing for it to end again. The smartest man in the universe has run the numbers on his own heart, and the numbers came back bad. The show will never confirm that. It cannot without collapsing the comedy into pure grief. So it leaves the photo on the wall, leaves the origin half retracted, and lets the smartest man in the universe keep drinking. And the photograph is the perfect object to start with, because it is doing on a wall what the whole show does across seasons. It is a piece of evidence that does not fit, placed in plain sight, in a context that makes you want to look away from it, daring the obsessive to stop and notice that the official story has a hole in it exactly the size of a family. Birdperson kept that photo. Birdperson, the friend who knew Rick before the armor, chose to display an image of Rick as a grandfather during years Rick claims he was nothing but a hunter. Maybe Birdperson knew something about Rick's past that Rick has hidden even from us. Maybe the photo is the last surviving trace of a life Rick erased, kept by the one person Rick could not bring himself to lie to. We will probably never know, because the friend who kept it is dead, and the version of him Rick rebuilt is filtered through grief and damage, and may not remember the truth any better than Rick wants to. The first mystery of Rick and Morty is Rick himself. We have watched him for years. We still do not know which of his tragedies are real, which of his lives we have seen, or how many families came before the one we think is the only one. If you are already hooked, do me one favor before we go deeper. Subscribe to the channel. I know every video on the internet asks you for this in the first 30 seconds, so I will keep it honest. These breakdowns take an absurd amount of time to research and write. Every claim in here is checked against the actual episodes, and the single biggest thing that tells the algorithm to show them to other people who would actually enjoy this is you hitting that button. That is it. No long pitch. We have 11 more of these to get through, and they only get stranger from here. Moving on to a question the show answered, celebrated answering, and then later admitted it had answered the wrong way. Who is Evil Morty? For a long time he was the show's best ghost, a Morty in an eye patch who turned up in the Citadel of Ricks, the secret city where thousands of Ricks and thousands of Mortys lived together, and who turned out to be running the whole thing from the shadows. He was introduced almost as a throwaway, a sinister background figure in an early Citadel episode, the one Morty who seemed wrong, who carried himself like a predator among prey. The show could have left him as a one-off creepy image. Instead, it kept bringing him back, each appearance raising his ceiling, until the unassuming sidekick character class had produced its own apex, a Morty who had somehow climbed to the top of a civilization built specifically to keep Mortys at the bottom. First he was a puppet master controlling another Rick from inside the Rick's own body. Then, seasons later, he ran for president of the Citadel on a campaign of saying almost nothing, won in a landslide, and used the office to murder his rivals and seize total control. And the entire time, the show dangled the same bait in front of us. Whose Morty is he? Every Morty belongs to a Rick. So which Rick made this one? And what did that Rick do to him to turn him into this? There were clues, planted years before the payoff, that almost nobody connected at the time. Long before the finale, an earlier Rick villain captured our Rick and began downloading his memories before being interrupted. The show let that sit as a defeated bad guy and a foiled scheme. Only much later does it become clear that the partial download of Rick's memories did not simply vanish. Evil Morty walked away with it. That stolen, incomplete copy of Rick's own mind is part of how a single Morty came to understand the architecture of the entire Citadel better than the Ricks who built it. The show planted that theft in one episode and paid it off in another seasons later, and most of the audience never noticed the thread connecting them. When the answer finally came, it was better than the bait. Evil Morty explains it himself, in the Season 5 finale, in a monologue that reframes the entire show. He is not a Morty who went bad, he is a Morty who simply refused the premise. Every other Morty, he explains, is trapped, and the trap has a name and a shape. The Ricks built a structure called the Central Finite Curve, a wall drawn around a slice of the infinite multiverse, and the wall was drawn according to a single rule. Only realities where Rick Sanchez is the smartest being alive are allowed inside. Every universe within the curve is bent around one man, and the reason the curve needs Mortys at all is the part that turns the stomach. A Morty's brainwaves, the show establishes, cancel out a Rick's hiding the genius signal that would otherwise make every Rick a target. A Morty is camouflage. A Morty is the thing you keep next to you so the universe cannot get a clean read on how dangerous you are. That is the actual designed purpose of every Morty inside the curve. Not grandson, not companion, cloaking device. Living, breathing, frightened cloaking device. Manufactured and distributed so that Ricks can move through the multiverse unseen. So when Evil Morty calls every other Morty a prisoner, he is not being dramatic. He is describing the engineering. The Mortys are not people in their own stories. They are equipment in someone else's, and the entire civilization of Ricks was built on the quiet agreement that this was acceptable, that a near-infinite supply of suffering boys was a reasonable price for a near-infinite supply of cover. Evil Morty figured that out, and instead of accepting it, he spent years climbing the structure of the Citadel, accumulating power, and finally blew a hole clean through the Central Finite Curve so he could walk out into the actual infinite multiverse, the part with no Rick in it, the part where a Morty might get to be the main character of his own life. The last shot of him is a portal opening onto an endless plane and a small figure stepping through it, free, gone. Great answer, genuinely great, and it created 3 larger mysteries it has refused to touch since. The first is simple: where did he go and what is he doing? The show built him into the most competent, most dangerous, most coldly intelligent character it has ever produced, gave him access to the entire unbounded multiverse, and then put him on a bus. He has barely appeared since. The single most powerful figure in the mythology walked off screen and the writers have left him there, which means at any moment the show can pull him back out. And until it does, he is a loaded gun sitting on a shelf we are not allowed to look at. The second is darker. If the central finite curve is destroyed, then the wall that kept every Rick the smartest being in his universe is gone, which means somewhere out in the newly opened infinity there are now Ricks who are not the smartest, Ricks who are second best, Ricks who can lose. The show casually demolished the central physical law of its own universe and has spent very little time on what that actually means for the man we follow. Our Rick has built his entire identity on being the Rickest Rick. Evil Morty may have just made that title meaningless, and nobody has made Rick reckon with it. The third is the one that eats at the foundation from underneath. Evil Morty's whole argument is that Mortys are slaves to a structure built by Ricks. He proves it. The show agrees with him. The narrative treats his escape as a kind of liberation. But our Morty, the one we follow, the one whose name is in the title, is still inside that structure, still the sidekick, still the cover story. If Evil Morty was right, and the show clearly believes he was, then our Morty is not a free character making choices. He is a prisoner who has not figured out he is in a prison. The show handed us that reading, full of conviction, and then went straight back to using Morty as Rick's sidekick as if the speech had never happened. It has never once let our Morty grapple with the idea that his entire existence might be a cage built specifically for him. And the cruelty of the structure is that our Morty was right there. He was in the room. Evil Morty delivered the speech that explains the whole prison directly to him, the one Morty who most needed to hear it. And our Morty walked out of that room and went back to being Rick's sidekick as if the words had not been about him too. Either he did not understand, which is its own kind of tragedy, the prisoner who hears the door explained and does not realize it is his door, or he understood and chose the cage anyway, because the cage is also the only family he has. Because freedom in an infinite multiverse with no Rick in it is also just being alone forever, and a comfortable lie about mattering might be better than a true and unbearable solitude. The show set up that choice, and then refused to make Morty face it, which means the most important question about the main character, whether he would choose the cage if he understood it was a cage, is one the show has carefully arranged for him to never have to answer. The most important thing anyone ever said about the main character is something the main character is not allowed to fully hear, and may not want to. And consider what he had to become to do it. The show establishes that Evil Morty did not stumble into power. He engineered it across years, manipulating Ricks, gathering power, turning the very system designed to keep Morty's disposable into the tool of his escape. He used a partial copy of Rick's own downloaded memories, stolen from an earlier scheme, to understand the machine better than its builders did. He ran for office in the Citadel, and won by saying almost nothing, because he understood that a population of Mortys, starved of agency their entire existence, would project everything they wanted onto a Morty who simply refused to be a sidekick. He is the most patient, most strategic character the show has ever produced. And the show built all of that competence and then sent him through a hole into infinity and stopped following him. A character that capable, that motivated, that free, is not a resolved plot thread. He is a countdown. So the question was never really who is Evil Morty. The show answered that. The question it left open is the one underneath. If Evil Morty was telling the truth, then what does that make the Morty we have been rooting for this whole time? And the show, which gave us every piece needed to ask that, has gone very quiet on the answer. Moving on to a member of the family who may not be who she says she is, who may not know it herself, and whose own father has admitted he cannot tell anymore. Is Beth a clone? This one is not a fan theory the show ignores. This is a question the show raised, dramatized, built an entire character around, and then explicitly chose never to resolve, on the record as a creative decision. Late in season 4, Beth confronts Rick with a fear that has clearly been gnawing at her. She suspects that at some point Rick made a clone of her, and Rick tells her a story. Years ago, he says, Beth came to him wanting to leave, wanting to abandon her family, and go have adventures in space the way her father always had. And Rick, faced with a daughter who wanted out, offered her a deal. He would make a perfect clone, identical down to the memories, and one of them would stay home with the husband and the kids while the other flew off into the galaxy to be free. Neither of them, he tells her, would ever know which was the original. Then he tells her he does not remember which one stayed. He says he scrambled the records on purpose so that even he could never tell. Then he tells her the entire story might be a lie he just invented on the spot to mess with her. He genuinely leaves it open, to her face, whether she is the woman who was born his daughter, or a copy he printed in a lab, and whether the version flying through space is the real one or the same kind of copy. The deal itself deserves a closer look, because of how Rick framed it. He did not offer to let Beth leave. He offered to let Beth leave without consequences, by leaving a copy behind to absorb them. One Beth gets the stars, the other Beth gets the husband and the children and the ordinary life. And crucially, neither the family nor the Beths themselves would carry the guilt of an abandonment, because from the outside nothing would have changed. There would still be a Beth at the dinner table. Mom would still be home. The price of freedom, in Rick's accounting, was simply manufacturing a second person to stay behind and be the version that did not run. That is the offer a father made to his unhappy daughter. Not go and be free. Split yourself in two so that the part of you that escapes never has to feel what it did to the part that stayed. And here is what makes it permanent. The show then introduces both the Beth who stayed home and Space Beth, the one who left and became a hardened intergalactic rebel. They meet, they argue, they eventually form a strange, prickly bond, and at one point the two of them even begin a relationship with each other, which is its own dizzying thing to sit with. But through all of it, neither Beth knows which one is the clone. The show could resolve it in a single line, a blood test, a serial number, a confession from Rick in a weak moment. It never does. Both Beths simply continue to exist, each privately wondering if she is the echo and not the voice. And the show keeps adding wrinkles instead of answers. At one point it is suggested that the cloning may have involved decoys, that the version sent to space might itself have been a decoy of a decoy, that Rick's process was deliberately layered so that no single test could ever trace the original. Space Beth herself, the one who left to become a galactic freedom fighter, does not know what she is. She has said as much. She fights, she leads, she carries herself like the realest person in any room, and underneath it she carries the same splinter as the Beth who stayed. Neither woman can prove she is the one who was born. The show even lets them coexist in the same scenes, in the same house, two Beths in one kitchen, and refuses to let either of them, or us, settle it. The reason this lands so hard is that it is not really about cloning. It is about a daughter who grew up asking whether her father loved her or merely tolerated her, and who is now handed a literal, physical version of that exact uncertainty. Am I the real one? Did he keep me? Or did he keep the copy and let me think I was kept? Rick built a machine that turned Beth's deepest childhood fear into a fact she has to live with. And then he threw away the only answer. Whether out of cruelty, or mercy, or because he honestly could not bear to know, we are not told. The cruelest possibility is the one the show keeps almost touching. What if there is no clone at all? What if Rick never made one, and the entire story was, as he suggested, a lie he told to give a miserable daughter the comforting idea that some version of her got to escape? In that reading, Space Beth is real. Both Beths are originals from different points of divergence, and the clone anxiety is a fiction Rick planted to manage his daughter's despair. Or the opposite. What if they are both clones, and the original Beth left or died long ago, and the two women circling each other are both copies arguing over an authenticity neither of them possesses? The show has every tool to settle this. It has chosen, deliberately and repeatedly, not to. Because the moment it tells you which Beth is real, the question stops being about you, and the whole horrible point is that it was always about you. Everyone watching has wondered, at some low hour, whether they are the person they were supposed to be, or some lesser draft. Beth gets to wonder it with a clone in the next room. And her father, the one person who could end the wondering, looked her in the eye and told her he made sure no one would ever know. Think about what that act of mercy, if it was mercy, actually requires. For Rick to have genuinely scrambled the records, to have made it truly impossible to tell which Beth is which, he would have had to give up the answer himself. He would have had to choose to not know which version of his daughter he kept. A man who needs to know everything, who cannot rest until he has solved the structure of infinity itself, deliberately blinding himself to the single most important fact about the person he claims to love most. Either that is the kindest thing he has ever done, sparing them both a hierarchy of realness that would poison everything, or it is the most revealing, because it means that on some level Rick would rather not know whether the daughter he lives with is the daughter he made, the same way he would rather not know so many things, the same way he sent his catchphrase out as a joke, and his origin out as a fake, and his wife back as a haunting. Rick's whole life is a series of choices to not look directly at the thing that matters most. The clone question is just the one where he made his daughter live inside the choice with him. Moving on to the friend who died, came back as a machine, flew off into the sky, and has been hanging over the entire show ever since like a debt nobody wants to pay. What happened to Phoenix Person, Bird person is the closest thing Rick has to a peer who is not also a version of himself, a war buddy, a best friend from the old revolutionary days, back when Rick fought the Galactic Federation alongside aliens and outlaws, and at least one woman he may have loved. The show doles out this history in fragments, but the shape of it is clear. There was a time, long before the garage and the grandkids, when Rick believed in a cause, took up arms for it, and stood shoulder to shoulder with comrades who would have died for him, and for whom he might have died. Bird person is the last living thread back to that Rick, the one who had not yet decided that nothing mattered. Every other witness to who Rick used to be is gone. Bird person is the only one who remembers, which is exactly what makes him so dangerous to Rick's carefully maintained story that he never cared about anything. Bird person is calm where Rick is frantic, sincere where Rick is sarcastic, and loyal in a way Rick has spent his whole life proving he is not. So of course the show kills him. At his own wedding, no less. His bride Tammy reveals herself as a deep-cover Federation agent and shoots him through the chest at point-blank range. The season ends on the corpse of the one person who ever fully trusted Rick. Then the show brings him back wrong. In a post-credit scene, the Federation has reanimated Bird Person's body as a cyborg called Phoenix Person, a hollow weapon wearing a dead friend's face, and Tammy flies off with the thing into the distance. And for a long stretch of the series, that is all we get. A friend turned into a machine, vanished over the horizon, unaccounted for. The show eventually circles back, in an episode structured like a journey through a dying mind. Rick, left alone in the garage while the family is away, rebuilds Bird Person's physical body from the pieces left after their fight, and then realizes the body is empty. The mind is still in a coma, forked and scattered. So Rick does the only thing Rick ever does. He goes inside. He injects his own consciousness into Bird Person's subconscious and starts walking through his friend's memories, trying to find the spark that is still Bird Person and lead it back out. And inside that mind, the show buries a confession it has never fully unpacked since. We learn why Bird Person pulled away from Rick in the old days, and it is not what anyone expected. The memories reveal that Rick, at some point, expressed feelings for Bird Person and told him in the same breath that none of it mattered, that life was meaningless, because the portal gun meant there were infinite realities and infinite versions of everything, so no single connection could be real. That is the thing that broke them, not a betrayal. Rick's nihilism aimed directly at the one person who got close enough to be wounded by it. Rick told his best friend that he cared about him, and that caring was pointless in the same breath, and Bird Person, who actually believed in things, could not survive being loved like that. The show drops this and moves on. It is one of the most revealing lines in the entire series, and it slips by almost in passing. We also learn there is a daughter. Bird Person and Tammy had a child, a fact the Galactic Federation deliberately walled off inside Bird Person's own memories so he would never know she existed. The episode ends on that daughter, grown, locked away on a prison asteroid, beating an opponent senseless in a cafeteria brawl, and being dragged off by guards. The show introduced a child of one of its most beloved characters, established that she is dangerous and imprisoned and entirely unaware of her parentage, and then left her sitting there, an entire bloodline, opened and abandoned in a single stinger. And the simplest, most concrete questions still hang there. Is Bird Person actually back, fully, the person he was, or is he a patched-together approximation running on salvaged parts and Rick's memories of him? There is a real wrinkle the show built in on purpose. The Bird Person that Rick walks through is by the episode's own logic, warped by what Bird Person himself remembered, filtered through a damaged and dying mind, which means even the revelations we get are unreliable, colored by grief. Rick even runs into a manifestation of his own younger self, living inside Bird Person's memories, a version of Rick that exists only because Bird Person held onto it. And at the end, Rick offers that memory self a chance to step out and become real. So how much of the friend Rick brought back is Bird Person, and how much is Rick's guilt assembling a companion out of spare components and borrowed recollections because he cannot stand to have let the real one die? And Tammy, the woman who married him as a deep cover assignment and shot him through the chest as a job, and who in the depths of his own mind turns out to have loved him more than she loved the Federation, which somehow makes the whole thing worse. The show sent her off, and has never properly closed her story, never let a restored Bird Person fully confront her, never resolved the betrayal that detonated the friendship in the first place. What makes Bird Person the heaviest of these threads is what he represents about Rick's capacity to begin again. Bringing Bird Person back is, on its surface, the one time Rick refuses to do the thing he always does. He does not abandon the loss. He does not portal away from it or replace it or edit it out. He sits in the garage for an unglamorous stretch of time and does the slow, frustrating, uncertain work of trying to bring a dead friend back, not by cheating death the way he cheats it for himself, but by going into the wreckage and looking for whatever is salvageable. It is the closest Rick ever comes to grieving correctly, to honoring a loss by trying to repair it rather than flee it. And the show, true to itself, will not tell us whether it worked, whether the Bird Person who comes back is really Bird Person, or just the most elaborate version of the same refusal, a man so unable to accept a death that he built a replacement and called it a resurrection. The one time Rick tries to do grief right, the show leaves it unresolved whether he succeeded or simply found a more sophisticated way to fail at the same thing. That ambiguity is the whole show in one relationship. Bird Person is the show's conscience. He is the proof that Rick was once capable of belief, of fighting for something, of standing next to a person without an exit strategy. Every time the show wants to remind you that Rick used to be someone better, it reaches for Bird Person, which is exactly why it cannot quite let him rest, and exactly why it cannot quite bring him all the way back either. A fully restored Bird Person would force Rick to either become that better man again, or admit out loud that he never will. A permanently dead Bird Person would close the door on Rick's last shot at it, so the friend stays in between, half machine, half memory, neither gone nor returned. The most important relationship in Rick's history, left deliberately unfinished, because finishing it would cost Rick the one thing he protects above all others, the ability to pretend he never cared. Moving on to the small pink creature in the family photos that an entire fanbase has been afraid of for years, for reasons the show planted and then refused to explain. What is Mr. Poopy Butthole, and why does he scare the people who love this show? He looks harmless, a little pink fellow with a friendly voice and a goofy name, the kind of character you would expect to show up for one cheap joke and vanish. Instead, the show did something genuinely unsettling with him, and it did it in the structure of the episode itself, rather than in any one line. The episode is told partly through clip show flashbacks, little glimpses of past adventures the family supposedly had together, and many of those flashbacks feature characters you have never seen, integrated into the family's history as if they had always been there, all of them warm, all of them beloved, all of them generating nothing but fond feeling. That is the tell. Those are the parasites, and they give themselves away through the very perfection of the memories they implanted. The episode is, in a real sense, an attack on the audience's own sense of continuity, asking you to question whether anyone you remember from past episodes was ever really there. He is introduced as if he has always been part of the family. He sits at the dinner table. Everyone knows him. The Smiths treat him with warmth and history, like an uncle who has been at every holiday for a decade, and the audience has no idea who he is, because we have never seen him before in our lives. The show presents a total stranger as a beloved fixture and dares you to notice that you have no memory of him at all. Then he gets shot. Rick blasts him across the room on the assumption that he is a parasite, because the episode is about memory parasites, alien creatures that implant fake happy memories of themselves into people's minds so that everyone believes they have always been around. The whole episode is about learning to tell real memories from fake ones, and the rule the family lands on is that parasites only ever give you good memories, while real people come with bad ones too. Mr. Poopy Butthole turns out to be real. He has bad memories. He bleeds actual blood. He is not a parasite. Rick shot a genuine friend in a panic, and the little creature survives, traumatized, and the family has to live with it. But the show never tells you what he is. Not an alien species we recognize. Not a human, not explained. He simply exists, with a wife and eventually a child, woven into the family's life with a depth the show insists on but never accounts for. And the fan dread comes from a detail the writers left lying around like a tripwire. In Rick's most important flashback episode, the one where we descend through his oldest memories and meet his old comrades, the whole revolutionary past gets laid out in front of us. Bird Person is there. Other old friends are there. Faces from the war. The people who knew Rick before the bomb. The episode is an inventory of everyone who has ever mattered to Rick across his entire life. And Mr. Poopy Butthole, the creature who supposedly has one of the longest, warmest, most established histories with this exact family, who sat at their table and was treated as family for years, does not appear in it, not in the background, not in a single frame. The one sequence, designed to show us where Rick's relationships came from, has a hole in it shaped precisely like the friend whose origin the show has always refused to explain. The creature who supposedly has the longest, deepest history with this family is absent from the one sequence that shows us where everyone came from. That absence has fueled the darkest reading fans have of any minor character in the show. That Mr. Poopy Butthole is exactly what the Parasite episode warned us about, just better at it. A being who implants himself into a family's history so smoothly that even the show's internal lie detector, the bad memory test, gives him a pass. The episode tells you parasites can only create good memories, so a parasite intelligent enough to manufacture a single bad memory, or to be so old and embedded that real friction has actually accumulated, would be undetectable, unkillable by the family's own rules. And the show pointedly had Mr. Poopy Butthole pass the test that every parasite failed, then left him out of the origin story, where every real friend appeared. And the show keeps him around in a way that makes the dread harder to dismiss, not easier. He recovers from being shot. He goes through a rough patch, a separation, a stint relying on government assistance, the kind of mundane human misery that a parasite, by the episode's own rules, should not be able to generate, because parasites only implant pleasant memories and pleasant presence. Mr. Poopy Butthole's life gets sad and ordinary in exactly the way a real person's does, which is either definitive proof that he is real, or proof that he is a parasite sophisticated enough to understand that the only way to be truly undetectable is to also be sometimes unpleasant, to manufacture not just good memories but the bad ones too, to pass the test by becoming indistinguishable from the thing the test was designed to find. The episode taught the family that suffering is the proof of personhood. Mr. Poopy Butthole suffers. The show dares you to decide whether that settles it, or whether it is the most patient deception the series has ever shown. Maybe it means nothing. Maybe he is just a sweet, strange little man the writers like, and the missing flashback cameo is an oversight, and the fan dread is the audience doing exactly what the show trained it to do, seeing a parasite in a friend. That would be the cruelest joke of all. The episode taught us to distrust the people we love by accusing them of being implants. The family nearly killed a real friend because of that distrust, and now the fanbase cannot look at that same friend without the suspicion creeping back in. The show built a machine for paranoia and pointed it at the most lovable character it had. Whether or not Mr. Poopy Butthole is hiding something, the show made absolutely certain you would never fully trust him again, and it has never once stepped in to say you were wrong to wonder. Moving on to the betrayal sitting in plain sight at the dinner table, the one the show confirmed, made canon, and then folded back into ordinary family life as if it were nothing. Jerry's father has been replaced, and almost nobody is talking about it. The setup is easy to miss in the noise, so it is worth laying out plainly. The family we follow is not, in a strict sense, the family the show started with. The show ran for 6 episodes with 1 Rick, 1 Morty, and 1 family, and then, in the episode that defined its willingness to go anywhere, it destroyed them. Rick mixes a love potion for Morty that goes catastrophically wrong, spreads through the population, and mutates every human being on the planet into a writhing monster. The cure makes it worse. The world is, by Rick's own assessment, beyond saving. There is no fixing it. So Rick does the thing that should have ended the show, and instead became its operating principle. He opens a portal to a reality almost identical to the ruined one. A reality where, by lucky timing, his own counterpart and Morty's counterpart have just blown themselves up in a garage accident, and he walks his Morty into that world to take the dead boys' places. Early on, in one of the show's defining moves, Rick poisons the entire planet by accident, mutating every human on Earth into a grotesque monster. The dimension is unsalvageable, so Rick simply finds a nearby reality where his exact counterpart and Morty's counterpart have just died in a freak accident, leaving 2 fresh graves and an intact family with 2 empty spaces. Rick and Morty bury their own dead selves in the backyard, walk into the house, and take over the lives of the versions who died. They never tell the rest of the family. Beth, Jerry, and Summer in that house have no idea their Rick and their Morty are corpses in the yard, and the ones at the table are refugees from a dead world. The mechanics matter, because the show is precise about them even as it is casual. Rick does not pick a random reality. He finds one where his counterpart and Morty's counterpart have died at the precise moment, in a freak garage accident that leaves 2 fresh graves and 2 open slots in an otherwise intact family. The timing has to be exact. The bodies have to be disposed of, which Rick and Morty do themselves, in the yard, with shovels, while the rest of the family is none the wiser. And then they walk inside and resume lives that were never theirs, eat at a table set for boys who are now buried under the swing set, and let a mother and father and sister grieve nothing, because as far as those 3 know, nothing was lost. 2 strangers moved in wearing their families' faces, and the family never noticed the substitution. Sit with that for a moment, because the show drops it casually and moves on. The family unit at the heart of this show is built on a substitution that 2 of its members performed in secret and have never disclosed. Morty has to live the rest of his life knowing he is sleeping in a dead boy's bed, eating at a dead boy's place, being loved by a mother and father and sister who think he is their son and brother when their actual son and brother is rotting under the swing set. The show treats this as a season 1 gag, and then asks you to invest emotionally in this family for years, knowing the whole time that half of them are unwitting hosts and the other half are quiet imposters. And the question it never answers is the one that should haunt every quiet family scene. Does it matter? Is the Beth who raised the original Morty any different from the Beth raising this one? Is a father still your father if he is technically the father of a boy you buried? The show keeps staging tender moments between Morty and his parents, moments that are supposed to land as real, while never letting you forget, if you remember the graves, that this is not Morty's family at all. It is a family Morty moved into. Every hug carries an asterisk. Every I love you is being said to the wrong boy. And Morty, who was a child when this happened, has to carry that arithmetic alone for the rest of the series, because the one adult who could share the weight, Rick, is the one who arranged the swap, and clearly does not lose sleep over it. The show did once let Morty put words to it, and the words are some of the most quoted in the series, usually stripped of the horror that produced them. Trying to comfort his sister Summer when she considers running away, Morty tells her the truth he learned in the backyard. He tells her not to run, because nobody exists on purpose, nobody belongs anywhere, and everybody is going to die. He delivers it as comfort. He means it as comfort, and it is the philosophy of a 14-year-old who buried his own corpse and moved into a dead stranger's bedroom, offered to his sister as the closest thing to wisdom he has. That is what the swap did to him. It did not just traumatize him. It rewired his entire understanding of what a person is worth, and he now hands that rewiring to the people he loves as a gift. The show has gestured at the rest of the toll. There are moments where Morty's casual brutality, his growing willingness to bury bodies and lie to his mother and treat death as a chore, traces directly back to that early lesson that family is interchangeable and a corpse is just a logistics problem. But it has never sat Morty down and made him reckon fully with the fact that he abandoned a grieving reality and stole a dead boy's life. It planted the most disturbing premise a family sitcom has ever run on, watched it grow roots under every scene, and then asked you to laugh and cry at that family as if the roots were not there. And the show is aware of the discomfort, because it occasionally pokes it. There is a grave in the backyard. The show remembers the grave. It will, every so often, cut to it, or reference it, or let a character stand near it, a small deliberate reminder that the original Morty is still down there under the family's own yard, that the boy whose life this Morty is living was never mourned by the parents who think their son is alive and well at the dinner table. The bodies did not go away, they are landscaping now, and the family walks past them every day without knowing, while the 2 people who do know, Rick and Morty, have silently agreed never to bring it up. The mystery is not what happened, we saw what happened. The mystery is how everyone, the characters and the audience both, agreed to stop thinking about the graves in the yard, and what it costs a 14-year-old to keep that particular secret for the rest of his life. Moving on to the thing in the garage that you were told, explicitly and out loud, never to think about, which is of course the surest way to guarantee that you will. Own it? What is the deal with the talking cat? This is the rare mystery the show created entirely through a refusal. There is an episode where a cat appears that can talk. No setup, no explanation, no origin. It is simply there one day, in the house, sitting on the bed, holding a conversation. It is friendly, it hangs around. It wants, more than anything, to go to Florida, and it keeps steering every interaction back toward that single sunny goal. And the strangeness is not that a cat can talk, because this is a show where stranger things happen before breakfast. The strangeness is the cat's complete refusal to explain itself, paired with a charm so deliberate it starts to feel like a tactic. And Morty reasonably keeps asking the obvious question, why can you talk? How is this possible? What are you? The cat dodges. Rick, when he finally agrees to look, uses his technology to read the cat's mind and see its true history. We never hear what he sees. We only see his reaction. Rick, the man who has watched planets die and committed atrocities without blinking, looks into the cat's past and comes away so disturbed that he refuses to speak about it, tells Morty they are dropping the subject permanently, and the two of them agree to simply never think about the cat again. The episode ends. The cat is gone. We are never told what was in its mind. It is a brilliant piece of construction because it weaponizes the audience's own curiosity against itself. The show gives Rick, our stand-in for fearless intelligence, a piece of knowledge so awful that even he chooses ignorance. And then it makes you, the viewer, the only one still carrying the question. You are now more curious than the smartest man in the universe was brave. Whatever the cat is, Rick decided that not knowing was the safer life. The show is asking, without ever raising its voice, whether you are wise enough to make the same choice, and it is betting that you are not. What sells the horror is Rick's face. This is a man who narrates his own atrocities with a burp and a shrug, who has watched himself die and felt nothing, who treats the suffering of entire worlds as background noise. He looks into the cat's mind, and he comes back changed, shaken in a way the show almost never lets him be. He does not explain, he does not joke, he just tells Morty in a flat, rattled voice that they are going to Florida and they are never going to think about the cat again. And the finality of it is more frightening than any monster the show has ever drawn. Whatever Rick saw, it was bad enough that the correct response, in the judgment of the smartest being in the multiverse, was immediate and permanent denial. The writers have said different things at different times, that there was no answer, that the whole point was the absence of an answer, that they wrote it specifically to have no payoff and let it torture people. And then, in fragments, hints have surfaced anyway, loose suggestions that the cat's backstory involves something genuinely horrific, a trail of darkness following the creature from place to place, something that would recontextualize its sunny request for a Florida road trip into something predatory. But nothing has ever been confirmed on screen. The cat remains the one mystery the show solved for its own characters and deliberately withheld from its audience. Rick knows, Morty chose not to know. We were never given the option. What makes it more than a gag is what it says about Rick. We have watched this man stare down gods, torture himself in front of his family, and treat genocide as a Tuesday. There is apparently exactly one thing in the infinite multiverse that he encountered and decided was better left buried. Not a weapon, not an enemy. A small talking cat that wanted to go to the beach. The show used the cat to draw a line we did not know Rick had, a threshold of horror beyond which even he will not go, and then it refused to show us what is on the other side of that line. There is a quiet brilliance in choosing a cat, specifically to be the thing that breaks Rick's nerve. Not a god, not a weapon, not some cosmic horror with tentacles and a name you cannot pronounce. A house cat, a small, ordinary, talking animal that wants to go to the beach. The show could have made the unspeakable thing enormous, and it chose instead to make it tiny and familiar and harmless looking, because that is so much worse. It suggests that the thing Rick could not handle was not big and far away, but small and close. The kind of horror that sits in your house and asks you for things and seems on the surface perfectly fine. Whatever the cat is, it learned to pass. It learned to be cute and pleasant and want simple things, and underneath that, in its actual history, was something that made the smartest being in the multiverse decide that knowledge itself was a mistake. The mystery is not really the cat. The mystery is what could possibly be so bad that Rick Sanchez, who has looked at everything, decided there was finally something he would rather not have seen. We are at the halfway mark, which feels like the right moment to ask for something. We have gone through the family, the clones, the dead friend, the buried bodies, the cat nobody is allowed to think about, and there are just as many threads still ahead. If any of these have made you stop and go wait, what, and reach to look it up, that is the whole reason these videos exist, and the way you can actually help is small. Drop a comment with the one mystery on this list that bothers you the most, or the one you think has the best answer hiding in plain sight. I read them, and they genuinely shape which deep dives get made next. The second half is where things stop being clever and start being unsettling. So if you are settling in for the long haul, now is a good time to get comfortable. Let's keep going. Moving on to a piece of the show's architecture so large that most people never notice it, the way you do not notice the building you are standing inside. How does Rick keep replacing reality, and how many times has he done it before we started watching? Go back to the swap, the one where Rick and Morty bury themselves and move into a dead family's house. The disturbing part is not that it happened once. The disturbing part is the casual competence with which Rick executes it, the way the whole grotesque operation unfolds without a moment of hesitation or improvisation. He knows immediately that the solution to a ruined world is a replacement world. The scanning for a near-identical reality comes second nature, as does the specific requirement, a version where his own counterpart has just conveniently died and left a vacancy, and the bodies need burying, which he handles without comment, shovels all ready to hand. There is no learning curve on screen, no fumbling, no sign that this is the first time. The show presents it as a procedure Rick has, fully formed, ready to deploy, which raises the obvious and unsettling implication that a procedure this practiced is rarely a procedure used only once. Rick does it smoothly, efficiently, with the calm of a man who has done this before. He knows exactly how to find a reality close enough to pass, how to time the arrival to the freshly dead originals, how to dispose of the bodies, how to slot in without raising suspicion. This is not improvised. This is a practiced routine, and that raises a question the show has never once addressed directly. If this is a routine, how many times has Rick done it? Think about what that would mean. The Morty we follow believes he made this jump once, as a traumatized kid, and has lived in the replacement house ever since. But Morty only knows what Rick told him. Morty's memory of his own life runs exactly as far back as Rick allows it to. We have watched Rick wipe memories, fabricate memories, and rewrite the past of everyone around him whenever it is convenient, so there is no solid floor under the assumption that this Morty has only ever been swapped once. He could be the latest in a long chain of Mortys, each one moved into a new dead boy's life when the old reality became inconvenient, each one told he had done it just the one time. The continuity of Morty's identity rests entirely on the honesty of the one character who has proven, repeatedly, that he will lie about exactly this. And the show has shown us directly that Rick treats versions of his own family as interchangeable inventory in exactly this way. There is a wall of monitors, there is the daycare for infinite Jerrys, an entire facility built on the premise that one Jerry is as good as another and can be swapped without anyone much caring, a premise the show confirmed when a Jerry actually was swapped there and went home to the wrong family and barely anyone noticed for years. And there is Rick's open, casual willingness to refer to his grandchildren as if they are one configuration of a part he keeps in stock. The infinite Jerry daycare is the whole horror in miniature. The show built a literal warehouse of spare family members and played it for laughs, and in doing so confirmed that in Rick's universe, the people you love come in unlimited quantities and can be exchanged at a counter. The show flirts with the implications and then backs away every single time. It will show you that wall in the garage covered in surveillance equipment, Rick keeping tabs on countless versions of his own family across countless realities, as if the specific Beth and Morty and Summer in front of him are interchangeable inventory, replaceable from a catalog he maintains. It lets Rick refer to his grandchildren with a coldness that only makes sense if on some level he knows there are infinite spares. And then it pulls back to a warm family dinner and asks you to forget that the man passing the potatoes thinks of the people at the table as one configuration among billions currently installed. The unanswered question is whether the family we love is real or rented, whether the bonds we have watched form over years are genuine relationships or the latest run of a program Rick keeps restarting whenever a version breaks. The show gives Rick every tool he would need to be doing this, shows him using those tools, establishes that he has no moral barrier against it, and then never tells us the count. One swap that we know of. The number of swaps we do not know about is by the show's own logic, potentially enormous, and the most chilling version of this story is the one where our Morty is not the original who made the jump, but a much later draft, sitting in a stranger's bedroom, certain he remembers a childhood that a version of him 30 or 30 Mortys ago actually lived. The show has even given us the mechanism by which this would be undetectable: memory editing. Rick has a device that removes specific memories cleanly, and he has used it on Morty. We have seen it, An entire episode is built around the discarded memories Rick has pulled out of his grandson's head and stored in jars. So picture the full horror of it. A Morty could have been swapped a dozen times, and after each swap, the inconvenient memories, the grief, the confusion, the awareness that the family is not his, could simply be edited out, leaving behind a clean Morty who believes he has only ever lived one life in one house with one family. The jars in Rick's lab are full of the proof that Morty's past is editable. We have seen the jars, we have seen what gets put in them, and we have no way of knowing how much of what Morty thinks he remembers is real, and how much is just whatever Rick decided to leave behind after tidying up the parts that would have made the boy ask questions. Moving on to the woman at the bottom of Rick's whole tragedy, the one the entire show is supposedly built around, who has appeared on screen for a total of a few minutes across the entire series. Who was Diane, and why won't the show let us see her? Diane Sanchez is Rick's wife. She is the reason for everything. Her death, alongside their daughter, is the bomb at the center of Rick's origin, the loss that turned a happy garage inventor into a multiverse wandering nihilist with a vow of revenge. The show has named her, mourned her through Rick's every action, and built its single most important flashback around the morning she died. By any measure of narrative weight, Diane is one of the most significant characters in the series. She is the gravity well that everything else orbits. Pull her out of the story and there is no Rick as we know him, no quest, no nihilism, no citadel built from a broken man's genius, no portal gun invented in a grief-fueled frenzy. Everything downstream of that garage flows from her absence. The show tells us, again and again, in its most serious moments, that Diane is the wound that never closed, and yet the show has shown us almost nothing of her. A silhouette, a few frames, a reconstruction, a voice. For a character whose death is the load-bearing beam of the entire emotional structure, Diane is kept almost entirely off-screen, almost entirely unknown. There is something even darker that the show shows once and never sits with. Rick's original dimension, the one where Diane and the first Beth died, was not simply abandoned. Rick kept it on a loop. He froze his home reality on the worst day of his life, the day he lost them, and left its inhabitants trapped there for decades while he wandered the multiverse. An entire world, suspended in Rick's grief, held in a repeating moment of catastrophe because the man who could travel anywhere could not bear to let that one day finish. The implications are enormous, and the show drops them almost as a footnote. Rick did not just lose his world, he imprisoned it, sealed it in the amber of the moment it broke, the way you might leave a room exactly as it was when someone died and never let anyone move the furniture. The difference is that Rick's room was a populated reality, and he condemned everyone in it to relive his worst day indefinitely so that he would never have to admit it was over. There is one extraordinary scene that makes the absence worse instead of better. Rick, alone, builds a simulation of Diane. He has the technology to recreate her, to talk to her, to have, in some thin artificial sense, his wife back, and he uses it not for comfort but for self-laceration. The simulated Diane, running on Rick's own programming, turns on him, tells him truths about himself he cannot bear, dismantles him. Rick built a ghost of the woman he lost specifically so that she could tell him he deserved to lose her. It is one of the most revealing things the show has ever done with the character, and it tells you everything about Rick and almost nothing about Diane, because the Diane in the simulation is not Diane. She is Rick's guilt wearing Diane's face. We still have no idea who the actual woman was. That is the mystery, and it may be the most deliberate one on this entire list. The show could give us Diane. It could do a flashback episode, show us the marriage, show us the life before the bomb. Let us love her so that her loss lands even harder. It refuses, and the refusal is the point. Rick has spent decades unable to look directly at what he lost, building simulations and origin stories and revenge quests precisely so that he never has to sit in a plain memory of his wife's actual face. The show puts the audience in Rick's exact position. We orbit Diane's absence. We feel her gravity in every one of Rick's worst choices. We are never allowed to see her clearly, because Rick cannot. Because looking clearly at her would mean feeling the loss without the buffer of a plan, and the buffer of a plan is the only thing that has kept Rick functional for 30 years. The simulation has a name. He calls it Diane, letters standing in for the wife the letters cannot bring back, an artificial intelligence he built specifically, by his own admission, to haunt him. Read that again. Rick did not build a comforting version of his wife. He built a haunting, A machine whose entire purpose is to keep the wound open, to make sure he never gets a full night's relief from what he did and what he lost. And in one of the quietest, most important scenes the show has ever staged, this AI is the one that nudges Rick toward finally letting go, toward moving on from the revenge that has defined him. The dead wife's ghost, rendered in software by the grieving husband, talking the husband out of his grief. And then, in the same breath, the AI is the one who points out that his enemy is now within reach, reigniting the very hunt it just helped him consider abandoning. Even Rick's tool for healing is also his tool for staying broken. He cannot build a version of Diane that only comforts. The Diane he builds always, eventually turns into the thing that keeps him in the wound, because that is the only Diane he can stand to keep, the one that hurts. So the woman who explains the entire show remains a blank the show protects. The few times it has cracked the door, it has shown us not Diane but Rick's relationship to her absence, which is grief refracted through a man who turned his grief into a weapon, and his weapon into a personality. The few glimpses we do get are almost cruel in their brevity. A silhouette in a flashback, a reconstructed voice in the garage AI, a name, Diane, that the show treats with a reverence completely out of proportion to how little it has shown us of the person who carried it. We know she existed. We know she was loved. We know her death is the hinge the entire series swings on. We do not know her face clearly, her voice as it really was, a single full memory of her as a living woman rather than as a wound or a simulation or a reason. The show has built one of television's most elaborate tragedies on top of a character it has deliberately kept almost entirely blank, and the blankness is doing work. It is making us feel her absence the way Rick feels it, as a shape we cannot quite resolve, a hole exactly the size of a person, defined entirely by what fell into it. Until the show is willing to let Rick truly grieve, fully and without a revenge plot to hide behind, it cannot show us Diane, because she only exists, in any real sense, in the place where Rick refuses to look. The mystery of Diane is the mystery of whether Rick will ever be able to mourn instead of avenge. So far, across the entire run, the answer has been no. Moving on to the killer who got away, the one Rick spent his whole life hunting, the one the show finally caught and finished, and the question that catching him left wide open: what was the point, and what is Rick now that the point is gone? For the entire run of the show, Rick has a quest underneath the quest. The visible Rick drinks and adventures and ruins his family's lives. The hidden Rick is hunting one specific man across infinite realities, the Rick from another dimension who built the bomb that killed Diane and the original Beth, the one the show eventually names as Rick Prime. And Rick Prime is not just any killer. The show establishes him as the Rick who first cracked portal technology, the origin point, the one whose discovery created the whole interdimensional reality the show takes place in. He is also, by every indication, colder than our Rick, more capable, genuinely without attachments. When our Rick finally describes him, the word he reaches for is that Rick Prime is the real deal, a Rick who actually achieved the total detachment our Rick only performs. The man who murdered Rick's family is the man Rick might have become if the bomb had landed on someone else's garage. This is the spine of the whole thing. Every nihilistic shrug, every refusal to care, every cruelty, is the cover story over a man consumed by a single decades-long manhunt. Rick's nihilism was always a lie. He cared about exactly one thing. He cared about it so much that he reorganized infinity to find it. The hunt has a sting in its tail that the show planted and then mostly walked past. When Rick finally tracks Rick Prime to his lair, he finds it rigged with pre-recorded taunts, messages the killer left behind precisely because he knew our Rick would eventually come, and one of those taunts lands a blow that should have changed everything. Rick Prime suggests on the recording that our Rick may or may not be a clone himself, not the original, a copy. The line is tossed off, cruel and unprovable, and then the plot rushes onward and never returns to it. But think about what it does to a man whose entire identity is being the Rickest Rick, the original, the source. His mortal enemy's parting shot was to suggest he is a forgery, and the show let that suggestion hang in the air and then changed the subject, the same way it did with Beth. Two of the people closest to the center of the show, the daughter and the man himself, have both been told they might be copies, and the show has refused, deliberately, to confirm or deny either. And then the show does something genuinely bold. It lets him win. After all the build-up, Rick corners Rick Prime and kills him. The killer is dead. The quest is over. The bomb has been answered. And here is the question the show opened by closing that door. The question it has only just begun to circle. What is Rick Sanchez when the hunt is finished? Because the hunt was the secret engine. As long as Rick Prime was alive and uncaught, Rick had a reason to stay sharp, stay alive, stay moving. The revenge was a leash that kept the nihilism from swallowing him whole. He could not let himself fully stop caring, because caring about the revenge was the one thread keeping him tethered to the man he used to be. Kill the killer, and that thread is cut. Rick got the thing he organized his entire existence around, and the show has been unsparingly, devastatingly honest about what that does to a person. It does not bring peace. It brings the terrifying open question of what you are for, now that the thing you were for is done. The show has started to sit in this, and it is some of the heaviest material it has ever attempted. A Rick with no one left to hunt, no revenge left to plan, no cover story left to hide the grief under, is just a man alone with the loss he spent 30 years outrunning. The quest was never really about justice for Diane. It was about giving Rick something to do that was not feeling the full weight of her death. Now the something is gone, and the weight is all that is left. The mystery the show has refused to fully answer is whether Rick survives this. Not physically, whether the person survives it. Whether a man who built himself entirely out of a hunt can become anything at all once the hunt is over, or whether catching the killer was, in the end, the most dangerous thing Rick ever did to himself. And the show has been honest enough to show the early symptoms of that emptiness without naming the disease. A Rick with the hunt removed is a Rick who has to actually be present in his own life, has to sit at the table, has to be a grandfather and a father and a man rather than a weapon pointed at a single distant target. The show has let us watch how badly he handles that. The drinking does not stop. The cruelty does not soften the way you would hope. If anything, he becomes harder to be around, because the thing that organized him is gone, and what is left underneath is not peace but a raw, directionless version of the same grief he spent 30 years aiming at one man. He got his revenge, and it did not fix him, and on some level he knew it would not, which raises the cruelest possibility of all. That Rick kept the hunt alive for so long, refused to finish it for so many years, precisely because some part of him understood that the hunt was the only thing holding him together, and that catching the killer would not be a victory but a kind of suicide, carried out by other means. The show caught the villain, and then turned the camera on the hole where the villain used to be, and that hole is the realest mystery it has. Moving on to the structure underneath all of this, the rule that the whole show secretly runs on, the one evil Morty named, and then broke. If every choice creates infinite outcomes, why does anything our characters do matter? And does the show even believe it does? This is the philosophical engine, and the show is at war with itself about it. The premise is infinite realities. Every possible version of every event happens somewhere, which means there is no version of you that is the definitive one, no choice you make that was not also unmade by another you in another world, no loss that was not also a non-loss somewhere down the infinite hall of doors. Rick lives inside this premise the way the rest of us live inside gravity. It is simply the condition of his existence, and he has drawn the obvious conclusion from it, which is that caring is a kind of innumeracy, a failure to grasp the scale of the thing. To grieve one dead version of someone when infinite living versions exist is in Rick's math a rounding error mistaken for a tragedy. There is a reality where Morty said yes, and one where he said no, and infinite gradations in between. Rick states this openly, and uses it as the foundation of his nihilism. Nothing you do matters, he tells Morty, because somewhere it went every other way too. Your choices are not special. Your pain is not unique. Your reality is one frame in an infinite film strip, and the film strip does not care. This is not subtext. Rick says it out loud, repeatedly, and treats it as the obvious truth that frees him from guilt about anything. But the show does not actually believe Rick. Or rather, the show keeps trying to prove him wrong with its own structure, and failing in interesting ways. Because if nothing matters, why does the show spend so much effort making us care? Why build the clone anxiety, the dead boy swap, the grief over Diane, if all of it is just one frame among infinite frames? The show wants to have the cosmic horror of infinity and the emotional stakes of a family drama at the same time, and those two things actively fight each other. Every time the show makes you cry over Beth, or Morty, or Rick, it is contradicting its own stated physics, because under those physics there are infinite Beths, and the one you are crying over is statistically meaningless. The show knows this tension and has built entire episodes around it without ever resolving it. The central finite curve was its cleverest attempt at a fix. By walling off a finite slice of infinity, a region where only the realities with a supreme Rick are allowed, the show carved out a space small enough that the people in it could matter again. Inside a finite set, this Rick really could be the Rickest. This Morty really could be distinct. Choices could have weight because the alternatives were bounded rather than infinite. The curve was, in a sense, the show building itself a container in which its own emotional stakes could survive its own cosmic premise. It was a wall that made love possible by making infinity smaller. Evil Morty destroyed that wall on purpose, arguing that the comfort of mattering was itself a cage, which means the show, through its smartest character, deliberately demolished its own best mechanism for making its emotional stakes hold up, and then kept telling emotional stories anyway, in a now infinite multiverse where those stakes should logically dissolve. There is a smaller version of this contradiction that exposes the whole thing. The show runs on the rule that you can always leave a broken reality for a fresh one. That is the escape hatch under every disaster. Poison the world, move next door. Release a planet-eating creature, move next door. But the show also keeps insisting, in its quiet moments, that the specific people in front of us are irreplaceable, that this Morty's growing up matters, that this Beth's pain is real, that the bond between this grandfather and this grandson is the thing worth protecting. Those two rules cannot both be true. If you can always replace the reality, you can always replace the people in it, because the people are part of the reality. The show wants the escape hatch for its plots and the irreplaceability for its feelings, and it has never once admitted that having both is a cheat. So the unanswered question is the biggest one of all, the one the whole series is built on top of without ever settling. Does anything these characters do matter? Inside the rules the show itself established. Rick says no. The show's heart says yes. Evil Morty took Rick's side and broke the one structure that let the heart win. And the writers have never planted a flag on the answer, because the moment they do, half the show collapses. Say nothing matters, and every emotional climax becomes a lie. Say it all matters, and Rick's entire worldview, the thing that makes him Rick, becomes a delusion you can no longer take seriously. There is a version of this question that hits even harder when you turn it on the audience instead of the characters. We are the ones who chose to invest. We picked this Rick and this Morty out of the infinite available versions and decided to care what happens to them, knowing the show keeps telling us there are infinite others exactly as valid. Every time we feel something for these specific characters, we are doing the thing Rick says is foolish, treating one frame of the infinite film strip as if it were the only one that counts. And the show needs us to keep doing it. It cannot survive if we ever fully take Rick's side and stop caring. So the real contradiction is not just inside the story, it is in the contract between the show and the person watching. The show argues, through its smartest character, that none of this matters, and then depends, for its entire existence, on you refusing to believe him. You are the proof that mattering is a choice you make in the face of evidence, not a fact the universe hands you. Which might be the most hopeful thing the show accidentally says, buried inside its bleakest one. So the show holds both, refuses to choose, and lets the contradiction generate the very specific ache that nothing else on television produces. The mystery is not a plot thread, it is the operating system, and it was designed, from the start, never to be solved. Moving on to the daughter who is not the daughter we have been watching, the one Rick lost, the little girl in the garage, and the question the show buried so deep that most viewers do not realize it is a question at all. What happened to the original Beth, the one who actually died? Untangling this requires holding two Beths in your head at once, and the show makes that hard on purpose, because for years it let everyone, including the characters, including the audience, including Morty himself, believe a comfortable simplification. There is the Beth we watch every week, a grown woman, a horse surgeon of all things, a job the show treats as a running joke about wasted potential, married to Jerry, mother to Summer and Morty. For 6 episodes, and well beyond, the assumption was that this Beth and her family lived in Rick's home reality, that this was simply Rick's daughter and Rick's grandkids in Rick's original world. The show let that assumption stand because it was load-bearing for the emotional setup, and then it spent later seasons carefully, deliberately pulling the floor out from under it, one revelation at a time, until the comfortable version was no longer available to anyone paying attention. And then there is the Beth from Rick's origin, the little girl who died in the garage alongside Diane when the bomb went off. For a long time, casual viewers assumed these were the same person, that the dead little girl somehow grew up to be the woman at the dinner table. The show eventually makes clear, for those paying attention, that they cannot be. Rick's original daughter died as a child. She never grew up. The Beth we follow is from a different reality entirely, a Beth whose family Rick attached himself to after his own was gone. Let that land. The central father-daughter relationship of the show, the one the series mines for its deepest emotional material, is between a man and a woman who is not his daughter. Not really. She is a version of his daughter from a reality where the bomb missed, or never came, a daughter who got to grow up because she belonged to a Rick who said yes to the portal gun, or who was never targeted at all. Our Rick's actual daughter, the one whose loss broke him, is a small body in a 30-year-old memory. The woman he lives with is the grown version of the child he was robbed of, salvaged from somewhere else. And every tender moment between them is shadowed by the fact that he is loving a stand-in for the girl he could not save. Beth does not fully know this. That is the cruelty the show keeps locked in the basement. She knows her father is strange and cold and capable of monstrous things. She does not walk around with the constant awareness that she is, to him, a living photograph of a dead child. When Rick looks at Beth, he is seeing two people, the woman in front of him, and the girl who never got to become her. When Beth looks at Rick, she sees a difficult father. The relationship is asymmetric at its root, and the asymmetry is grief that only one of them can see. The show has let this surface exactly once or twice, in moments where Rick's tenderness toward Beth suddenly tips into something that looks less like fatherhood and more like penance, and then it pulls back, because pulling back is the only way the family comedy survives. It goes deeper, because the show keeps showing us other Beths to make sure we never get comfortable with this one. There is the Beth who stayed and the Beth who went to space. There are the Beths glimpsed across other realities, some happy, some monstrous, some who never had children, some who became something the show has only hinted at. Every alternate Beth the show introduces is another reminder that the woman at the dinner table is one draw from an infinite deck, and that Rick, who can see the whole deck, chose to live with this particular card, or had it dealt to him, or settled for it after the one he wanted was burned. We do not know which. We do not know whether he picked her, found her, or simply landed near her and stayed because staying was easier than the alternative. The most important relationship choice of Rick's later life is one the show has never let us watch him make. The unanswered piece is what Rick actually feels when he looks at her. Is she a comfort, a second chance at the daughter he lost, a reason to keep going, or is she a wound that never heals, a daily reminder that the real Beth is gone and this one is borrowed? A girl he is using to play out a life that was stolen from him? The show will not say, because the answer determines whether the most important relationship in the series is love or grief in a love costume, and those are not the same thing, and the show needs you to believe it might be the first while showing you in the background the evidence for the second. The original Beth died in a garage. The Beth we love is what Rick built on top of that grave. He has never told her she is standing on it. And every gesture of fatherly love between them carries that unspoken weight. When Rick does something kind for Beth, when he protects her, indulges her, builds her something, gives her the approval she has craved her whole life, there is always the question of who he is really doing it for. Is he loving this Beth, the woman in front of him, on her own terms? Or is he making amends to a different Beth, the small one in the garage, the one he could not protect? Paying down an impossible debt to a dead daughter by lavishing it on a living substitute who does not know she is a substitute. Beth experiences these moments as a daughter finally getting her father's love. Rick may be experiencing them as a man doing penance to a ghost using his daughter's face as the altar. The same gesture, two completely different meanings, and only one of the two people in the room knows there is a second meaning at all. The show stages these tender father-daughter beats constantly, and every single one of them might be grief in disguise, and Beth will never know, because the one person who could tell her is the one person who needs her not to know in order to keep doing it. Moving on to a smaller, stranger thread, the kind the show drops in a single line and trusts the obsessive to catch. What does Rick actually do with the bodies? And what does that say about how he sees death? This sounds like a grim technicality until you start counting. The show has Rick treat death, including the deaths of versions of himself and his own family, as a cleanup task. He buries his own corpse and Morty's corpse in the backyard, and goes inside for dinner. He has, on screen, casually disposed of versions of the people he loves. He keeps, in the garage, the infrastructure for monitoring countless realities, which means he has watched countless versions of his family live and die, and has, by his own admitted logic, never had a reason to intervene, because there is always another one. Death for Rick is not an ending. It is a feature of a system with infinite redundancy. You do not mourn a deleted file when the folder contains infinite copies. The show plants the consequences of this worldview in Morty, and never fully cashes them in. Morty, who started as a soft and frightened kid, becomes capable of digging graves, lying to his mother about whose body is in the ground, and treating catastrophic loss as a problem to be managed rather than felt. He learned that from Rick. He learned it young, in the dirt of the backyard, burying himself. The show shows you the lesson taking hold. It shows Morty getting harder, getting colder, getting more comfortable with the math that says no single death matters because somewhere there is always another version. And then it mostly declines to ask the obvious question, which is what kind of adult that child becomes. We have watched Morty absorb a philosophy of death that took Rick a dead wife and 30 years of revenge to arrive at, and Morty got there as a teenager, by osmosis, without the tragedy that earned Rick the right to it. The show built that, on purpose, across years of small moments, and has never sat Morty down to face what he is turning into. The unanswered question is whether Morty is being saved or ruined by his proximity to Rick, and the show genuinely does not know, or refuses to commit. Every episode is evidence for both. Rick gives Morty wonders no other human will ever see. Rick also strips Morty of the ability to grieve normally, to value a single life, to believe that his own choices are anything but noise in an infinite system. Is that an education or a corruption? The show keeps both possibilities alive, because the honest answer is that it is both at once, and a story brave enough to say so out loud would have to admit that the lovable grandpa adventure show is, underneath, the slow-motion hollowing out of a child. So it shows you the hollowing and lets you decide whether to call it growth. Moving on to the place where all the Ricks and all the Mortys live together, the secret city, and the question its destruction left unburied. What happened to the survivors of the Citadel, and how many Ricks and Mortys are loose in the multiverse now? The Citadel of Ricks was one of the show's great inventions, a hidden city built by thousands of Ricks from thousands of realities, populated by Ricks and their Mortys, run as a grim multiversal bureaucracy. The irony the show built into it is sharp. Rick Sanchez, the man whose entire personality is that he trusts no one and bows to no institution and needs no one, helped create a government made entirely of himself, a society of Ricks who agreed to be governed, taxed, policed, and sorted. The most anti-authority being in the multiverse is a founding citizen of the multiverse's strangest authoritarian state. Our Rick claims to despise the Citadel, calls it an embarrassment, distances himself from it at every turn. But it exists because Ricks, despite everything they say, cannot actually stand to be as alone as their philosophy demands. They built a city to be alone together in, which is its own quiet admission that the nihilism was always a little bit of a lie. It existed because even infinite genius is lonely, and even Ricks who trust no one, including and especially themselves, decided they needed somewhere to gather. The Citadel had a school for Mortys. It had slums where the failed Ricks ended up. It had a class system, a police force, an economy, an election. It was a whole civilization made entirely of one man and his grandson, copied endlessly, sorted into winners and losers. And then evil Morty broke it. He won the presidency, purged the leadership, and in the season 5 finale, in the course of destroying the central finite curve, left the Citadel itself in ruins, raining its survivors out into space. The show cleaned up a little of the immediate aftermath. Spacebeth pulls Rick and Morty out of the wreckage. The story moves on, but it left a population unaccounted for. The Citadel had countless Ricks and countless Mortys, an entire society's worth, and the show scattered them and then mostly stopped talking about them. Where did they go? What happens to thousands of Ricks suddenly stripped of the structure that organized them, loosed into a multiverse where the wall guaranteeing Rick supremacy has just come down? What happens to thousands of Mortys, whose entire purpose was defined by a system that no longer exists? The show created an entire civilization and then deleted its government and let the citizens drift off screen, and it has never accounted for the diaspora, and we have already met some of what that diaspora produces. Before its destruction, the Citadel had shown us its underbelly in detail. A police force of Ricks and Mortys patrolling their own kind. A wave of murders and conspiracies. A working class of Ricks who never amounted to anything, bitter and broke, living in the shadow of their own infinite potential. Mortys radicalized by a system that treated them as livestock. Take a society that was already that unstable, already that full of resentment and failure and quiet violence, and then remove its government, shatter its city, and rain its citizens out across an unbounded multiverse, with no structure left to contain them. You do not get peace. You get thousands of damaged, dangerous, abandoned versions of the two most volatile characters the show has, set loose with grievances and portal technology, and nothing left to lose. This matters more than it seems, because those survivors are a standing army of plot. Any one of those Ricks could be a threat equal to our Rick. Any one of those Mortys could follow evil Morty's path. The show built a near-infinite supply of versions of its two main characters, established that they are dangerous and desperate and now homeless, and then set them adrift with no resolution. It is the largest loose end in the series by raw headcount. Thousands of Ricks and thousands of Mortys whose stories the show opened and abandoned. And the most unsettling implication is for our own pair. If the Citadel is gone and the curve is broken, then our Rick is no longer protected by the system that kept rival Ricks from being smarter than him, and our Morty is no longer the only Morty who might wake up. The destruction of the Citadel did not just end a location. It ended the guarantee that our heroes are special, and the show has never made them face the consequences of being ordinary in a crowd of their own infinite reflections. Moving on to the technology at the center of every adventure, the device the entire show depends on, and the question of what it costs that the show has only ever whispered. What is the true price of the portal gun, and who pays it? The portal gun is the engine of the show. It lets Rick and Morty go anywhere, any reality, any planet, in an instant, with a flick of green light. It is treated, most of the time, as a convenience, the thing that gets the adventure started, and gets them home by dinner. But the show has been careful, across its whole run, to keep reminding you that the portal gun is the single most coveted object in the multiverse. The Galactic Federation wanted it badly enough to occupy a planet over it. The Citadel of Ricks was built in part to control it. Rick guards the secret of it more fiercely than he guards anything except the things he refuses to feel. Entire factions, governments, and empires have organized themselves around getting their hands on portal technology, and our Rick is one of the only beings who truly has it, which makes him not just a clever old man but the holder of the most strategically valuable secret in existence. The show frames the portal gun as a toy. The universe in the show treats it as the bomb that ends everything, and the universe is right. But the show has dropped enough dark hints over the years to suggest the portal gun is not free, that interdimensional travel has a cost, and that the cost is paid by someone other than the people using it. The fluid that powers it is rare and strange. The act of opening a portal punches a hole between realities, and the show has occasionally suggested that these holes are not clean, that things leak through, that the casual tourism Rick practices across infinite worlds leaves damage in its wake that he never sticks around to see. Consider what Rick's lifestyle actually requires. He travels constantly between realities, and each trip, by the show's own implications, has consequences for the places he passes through. He treats every reality as disposable because to him they are infinite and therefore worthless. But the beings living in those realities do not experience themselves as disposable. To them, their world is the only world, and Rick moves through it, takes what he wants, and portals out, leaving behind whatever wreckage a god-tier intelligence with no respect for local consequences tends to leave. The show has shown us the aftermath occasionally, realities Rick ruined and abandoned, beings whose lives he upended on his way to somewhere else, and it has let us understand that this is not the exception. This is the normal operation of the portal gun. Every adventure has a body count we do not see, in a reality we leave before the bill comes due. The fuel itself is a quiet mystery the show dangles and drops. Portal travel runs on a specific fluid, and the show has made the fluid matter at key moments. Tampering with it, resetting it, getting its chemistry wrong has triggered some of the largest plot events in the series, including a glitch that yanked everyone who had ever used a portal back toward their original realities, exposing the whole tangled history of who came from where. So the substance that powers the show's central device is volatile. poorly explained, and capable of unraveling reality when it is handled wrong, and the show treats it mostly as a convenient plot lever, rather than a thing with rules we are allowed to understand. Where it comes from, what it costs to produce, what it does to the spaces it tears open, the show has never properly told us. It is the most important resource in the entire mythology, and it functions, narratively, as whatever the plot needs it to be that week. The unanswered question is the moral one the show keeps almost asking. If you could go anywhere, take anything, and never face the consequences because you would simply portal to a fresh reality before they caught up with you, what would you become? The portal gun does more than move you through space. It is a machine for escaping accountability, a way to make every action consequence-free by always being able to leave the scene. And Rick, who has had this power longer than anyone, is the answer to the question. He became a man who cannot stay anywhere, cannot face anything, cannot let a consequence land, because the deepest reflex of his life is the one the portal gun trained into him. When it gets hard, open a hole and step through it. He uses it on planets and on people. He uses it, most of all, on grief. The portal gun's true price is not the fuel or the wreckage in the realities he abandons. It is what a lifetime of frictionless escape does to the person holding it. Rick paid that price decades ago. The show keeps showing you the receipt and never reads it aloud. And it has shown you, more than once, what the absence of friction does to the people Rick drags along. Morty learns to portal away from problems the way Rick does. He learns that you do not have to fix the world you broke, you just have to leave it. The Dead Boy swap was that lesson in its purest form. The first time Morty saw that a ruined reality is something you walk out of rather than something you answer for, and every adventure since has reinforced it. The portal gun is not teaching these characters that they can go anywhere. It is teaching them that they never have to stay, that nothing they do has to be lived with, because there is always another door. The show built a machine that abolishes consequence, and then handed it to a child, and it has spent years documenting, almost in passing, what growing up consequence-free does to a person, while letting the machine keep getting framed as the coolest thing in the show. The portal gun is the wish everyone has, the ability to escape anything, and the show is the long, patient demonstration of why that wish, granted fully, hollows you out. Moving on to the home that is not a home, the address that keeps changing while the family pretends it has not moved, and the running horror the show plays as a punchline. How many times has this exact family been relocated, without ceremony, to a stranger's house, and do they even live in their own reality anymore? We covered the first swap, the one where Rick poisons a world and moves into a dead family's life. The show treats that as a one-time origin trauma. It is not. It happens again, and the second time the show is brutally honest about how routine it has become. The cause, the second time, is almost too stupid to bear, and the show knows it, which is why it plays the whole thing deadpan. A chain of events triggered by a glitch in the portal fluid sends everyone who has ever used a portal back toward their original realities, which briefly returns the family to the world they had fled into after the original poisoning. And in that world, waiting in the house, is the original version of Jerry from that reality, who had been bounced out years earlier in an unrelated mix-up. This Jerry, left alone upstairs for a few minutes, finds and releases a small creature, something cute and round and harmless looking, and the creature proceeds to assimilate the entire planet in a matter of seconds, converting all life on Earth into copies of itself before anyone can react. A world ended because a Jerry got bored and curious in a bedroom. The second destroyed Earth in the show's history was killed by the most harmless man in it, by accident, in under a minute, world over. Again, and the family stands at the portal watching a planet-sized monster finish eating their home, and they decide, with the weary calm of people who have done this before, not to fix it. They just leave. They find another reality where their counterparts have conveniently just died, and they move in, and they start cleaning up the bodies. The show stages the body cleanup as a casual final shot. The family, in yet another stranger's house, hauling away yet another set of corpses that look exactly like them, settling into yet another stolen life. And the only difference Rick can identify between the new reality and the old one, the only thing that distinguishes the world they now permanently live in from the one they just lost, is that the locals pronounce a single word strangely. That is it. An entire reality, an entire Earth, an entire version of the family, reduced to a difference in how one word sounds. They moved into a dead family's house over a pronunciation. Now count what that means for everyone at the table. The show makes it explicit. After this second move, not a single member of the family is living in their original reality. Not one. The Morty we follow is from the poisoned world. Summer and the Beths are from the world the creature ate. Jerry has been bounced between realities so many times, including a stretch where he was accidentally swapped at an interdimensional daycare for other Jerrys, that he genuinely cannot tell you which reality he started in, and the show plays his confusion for laughs. They are a family of refugees who have lost track of how many times they have fled, sitting in a house that belongs to dead people, in a reality none of them were born in, eating dinner, and here is the unanswered horror underneath the joke. If the family has been relocated this many times that we have seen, on screen, in the seasons we have watched, then how many times did it happen before, off-screen, in the years Rick was operating alone? Rick has the technology, the practice, and zero moral objection. He has now demonstrated, twice, that when a reality becomes inconvenient he simply finds a fresh one with freshly dead counterparts and installs his family in their place, and that he will do this over something as small as a released parasite or a botched antidote. The family's sense of continuous identity, their belief that they are the same people who lived in this house last season, rests entirely on Rick's willingness to tell them when a swap has happened, and the second swap proves he will let them figure it out only when they happen to be standing there watching the old world die. The ones they did not witness, they would never know about. The show built a family that cannot be sure how many times it has been replaced, sat them down for warm domestic scenes, and dared you to enjoy the warmth while remembering that the house is borrowed and the previous tenants are in the yard. And it reframes a line the show treats as a triumphant moment, when the family decides not to fix the world the creature destroyed, when they look at the scale of the ruin and simply choose to leave and start over somewhere new. The show plays it almost as growth, as the family finally accepting Rick's worldview, finally understanding that you do not have to mourn what you can replace, but sit with what they actually agreed to in that moment. They agreed that their home, their earth, the specific reality they had built lives in, was not worth saving because an identical one was available next door with the previous owners conveniently dead. They learned to do the thing that broke Rick, the thing that made Morty cold, the thing the portal gun trains into everyone who holds it. They learned that nothing has to be grieved if it can be swapped. The show framed the family's worst moral surrender as a moment of maturity, and trusted a few viewers to notice that what they were really watching was an entire family becoming Rick by degrees, one abandoned world at a time. Moving on to 3 words the whole internet learned to shout, the catchphrase printed on the merchandise, the thing fans yell at conventions, which the show told us years ago means the opposite of what it sounds like. What is Rick actually saying when he says wubba lubba dub dub? For a long time it played as pure nonsense, a goofy noise Rick makes when he is having fun, a Looney Tunes flourish, the kind of catchphrase a show invents to sell t-shirts. Morty assumed it meant nothing, because Rick claims to care about nothing, so his catchphrase should be empty too. And then the show, through Bird Person, who speaks Rick's old language, translates it. Wubba lubba dub dub, Bird Person explains, is an old phrase from his and Rick's revolutionary days. It means I am in great pain, please help me. The funny noise is a scream. The merchandise slogan is a cry for help. Every time Rick shouts it, grinning, drunk, in the middle of a wild adventure, he is saying the truest thing he ever says, hidden inside the dumbest sounding thing he ever says, and he is saying it constantly, in front of everyone, knowing nobody who matters will understand the words. The detail that makes it land is who does the translating. It is Bird Person, the one friend, the one person who learned Rick's old language back when Rick still had a life worth speaking it in. Only Bird Person can hear what the catchphrase actually says, which means the cry for help is built so that exactly one person in the universe can understand it, and that person is the one Rick lost, the one he let die at a wedding, the one he later had to rebuild out of parts. So the translation of Rick's suffering exists, but it lives in the mouth of a dead friend. The one being who could hear the scream is the one Rick failed to keep. It is the single most efficient piece of character writing in the show. The man who built his whole personality around not needing anyone has a reflexive, involuntary cry for help, and he has disguised it so well that his own grandson thought it was gibberish, and the entire fan base put it on coffee mugs. There is a grim economy to it. A man in real pain has 2 options. He can say it plainly and risk being helped, which means being seen, which means being known, which is the one exposure Rick cannot tolerate. Or he can encode the pain so thoroughly that he gets to express it constantly, get it out of his system a dozen times a day, without any of the risk, because no one can read the code. Rick chose the second option, and then went further than anyone, building the encoding into a catchphrase so catchy that the people around him would repeat his cry for help back to him as a fun noise. He turned his own suffering into a meme that his loved ones cheerfully echo. That is not a man who cannot express his pain. That is a man who has engineered a way to scream it at everyone he knows while guaranteeing that not one of them will ever do anything about it. The unanswered question is what the show wants us to do with that, because it raises the possibility that everything Rick does works the same way, that the nihilism is wubba lubba dub dub, that the cruelty is wubba lubba dub dub, that the whole loud, dismissive I don't care performance is one long cry for help, in a language he made sure nobody around him speaks, a man screaming please help me at a volume, and in a register specifically engineered to guarantee that the scream reads as a joke. And if that is true, then the saddest thing about Rick is not that he suffers, it is that he has spent his genius building a suffering that cannot be heard, even when it is shouted, even when it is translated, even when it is right there on the surface in 3 syllables everyone can repeat and no one can hear. The show told us the secret out loud. It has never made anyone in Rick's life act on it. That thread runs into the darkest material the show has ever produced, and it is worth being plain about it, because the show was. There is an episode where Rick, after a rejection that cuts straight to the old wound about Diane and his fear that he will never be loved again, goes quietly into the garage. No tantrum, no speech. He simply concedes a family argument, walks away, and in the garage he assembles a device. He tests it on a creature he has been keeping, comforting the creature even as he uses it, and then he turns the device on himself. He passes out from drinking before it can finish, and survives by accident. The show frames the whole thing in near silence, ends on Rick slumped at his desk through the night while Jerry obliviously does yard work in the driveway, and trusts you to understand exactly what you just watched. It is the same man, the one who shouts I am in great pain, please help me as a punchline. In the garage there was no audience and no joke, so the cry just stopped being words and became an action, and almost nobody in his life ever knew it happened. The show has never resolved this. It does not give Rick a recovery arc, a therapist who fixes him, a single clean moment where the pain lifts. It lets him keep going, keep drinking, keep shouting the disguised scream, and it leaves open the question it is far too honest to answer, which is whether a person built like this gets better or simply continues. If any of this is landing a little too close to home, that is worth taking seriously off the screen, not just on it, and there are people whose actual job is to help with exactly this. The show, to its credit, never pretends the pain is fake, it just refuses to promise that it ends. Moving on to an empire that fell, an entire galactic government that the show toppled almost as an afterthought, and the survivors it never accounted for. What happened to the Galactic Federation, and who out there remembers exactly who destroyed it? At one point the Earth is occupied. The Galactic Federation, a vast interstellar bureaucracy, takes over the planet between seasons, and the show comes back to a world already conquered. Aliens walk the streets, human society has been folded into Federation administration, and the detail that makes it bite is Jerry, who under the occupation is happier than he has ever been, because the Federation gave him a job, a sense of worth, a place in a system that values him. The empire that enslaved Earth is the best thing that ever happened to Jerry, which tells you exactly how low Jerry's bar is, and exactly how the Federation operates, buying compliance with the small dignities that people like Jerry have been starved of their whole lives. It absorbed the Smiths' world into its empire, and made at least one of them grateful for it. It is a genuine status quo change, the kind most shows would build seasons around, and Rick undoes it almost incidentally. While engineering his own escape from a Federation prison, he triggers a collapse of the Federation's entire economy, their currency cratering to nothing in an instant, the whole empire imploding from the inside because Rick found it more convenient to destroy a galactic government than to break out of a single cell the normal way. The show treats this as a victory lap and then changes the channel. But an interstellar empire does not simply evaporate. It had citizens, soldiers, administrators, worlds. It had the bird creature war veterans like Bird Person on one side and the Federation's enforcers on the other, an entire history of conflict that shaped Rick's youth. When Rick collapsed the Federation's economy, He did not kill it cleanly. He scattered it. Somewhere out in the galaxy are the remnants of a fallen empire, the bureaucrats and the enforcers and the true believers, all of them now stateless, many of them surely aware that their entire civilization was brought down by one specific old man from one specific backwater planet as a side effect of a prison break he found mildly annoying. That is a revenge plot the size of a galaxy sitting unused. The show built a powerful enemy, had Rick humiliated on the largest possible scale, and then walked away from the consequences as casually as Rick himself did. The unanswered question is whether the Federation's fall is truly over or merely paused, whether the show is sitting on an entire collapsed empire's worth of survivors who have every reason to come looking for the man responsible. Rick made enemies of an entire galactic government and then went home to argue with Jerry about the garage. The bill for that has never come. In a show this obsessed with consequences catching up to the people who outrun them, the largest outrun consequence of all is still out there, waiting, and it doubles as a window into who Rick actually is. If you look at the method, he did not defeat the Federation in battle. He did not lead a revolution or rally the oppressed worlds. He destroyed an empire by breaking its money, by flooding its economy until the currency meant nothing, an act of pure abstract sabotage that killed a civilization without Rick ever having to look any of its citizens in the eye. It is the portal gun philosophy applied to genocide. Cause the catastrophe from a distance, behind a screen, through a system, and then leave before the bodies are even cold. Untold numbers of beings had their entire world collapse because of what Rick did from inside a prison cell as a convenience, and Rick has never spent a single moment reckoning with the scale of it, because the scale is exactly what the method was designed to keep him from feeling. The show toppled a galactic empire, made it a punchline about cratering stock prices, and trusted you to notice eventually that you just watched a man casually end a civilization and feel nothing, and then go home to complain about his son-in-law. Moving on to the question that should change how you watch every dangerous moment in the show, the one that drains the stakes out of every cliffhanger by the back door if you think about it too hard. Can Rick actually die? And does the show even know the rules anymore? Early on, the show treated death as real. Rick could be hurt, could be cornered, could lose. Then the show introduced something it called Operation Phoenix, and the rules came apart. The introduction was a joke, which is how the show smuggles in most of its worst ideas. Rick transferred his mind into a young clone body, a teenage version of himself the family nicknamed Tiny Rick, ostensibly to handle a problem at his grandchildren's school. The bit was funny. Tiny Rick was a hit, popular, energetic, beloved, and then the show let the horror surface underneath the gag. The teenage body was overriding the old man inside it. The real Rick was being slowly erased, trapped, screaming for help through songs and scrawled messages that the kids mistook for teen angst, begging to be let out before the young brain dissolved him completely. They got him back into his original body in time. And what does Rick do? Having survived being nearly deleted by his own backup plan, he goes into the basement, finds the vats where his other clone bodies are growing in various stages, and butchers all of them with an axe, declaring the whole program a failure. Rows of half-formed Ricks, hacked apart by the original, in a basement, played as a dark laugh. Operation Phoenix is a backup system. Rick built it so that when he dies, anywhere, his mind is automatically uploaded into a fresh clone body waiting in a vat. He died. He woke up in a new body. He kept going. He treated it, briefly, as a failed experiment and took an axe to his clone storage in a fit of disgust, butchering rows of half-grown copies of himself in the basement and declaring the program over. Except it was not over. And this is where it gets genuinely strange. In a later episode, Rick dies again, and discovers that even though he destroyed his own version of the backup system, the program still works, because alternate Ricks in other dimensions kept running their versions of it. So when our Rick dies, his consciousness does not just fail to come back, it gets routed into a clone body in some other reality, body surfing across the multiverse, dying and waking up and dying again, bouncing between dimensions, several of them fascist nightmares, until he lands somewhere survivable. The show establishes on-screen that killing Rick does not reliably kill Rick, that his death is less an ending than a transfer, and that the network of backups is so distributed across realities that even Rick cannot fully shut it down. The creators have said the quiet part. Rick, by design, cannot die by conventional means. He has built too many safeguards across too many realities, but, and this is the part the show keeps as a loaded gun, That does not mean he cannot die at all. The comparison the show's own creator reached for is a vampire or a werewolf. Things that shrug off ordinary death but have one specific, hidden way they can be killed permanently. So somewhere in the rules of this universe there is a particular kind of death that would actually end Rick, and the show has never told us what it is. It has only told us that the normal kind does not count, and it has now spread the same immortality to the family. The backup body system has extended to Morty and to Summer. They have their own clones in vats now, a fact the show drops with the same casualness it drops everything, in an episode where we glimpse what happens when one of those backup bodies activates with no consciousness inside it, an empty Rick clone running on animal instinct, which is its own small nightmare the show declines to dwell on. Which means the show has, without ever announcing it, removed mortality from its three main characters, and then kept staging life or death adventures around them, asking you to feel tension that the show's own established rules say should not exist. The unanswered question is enormous, and the show refuses to face it directly. If the people we follow cannot really die, then what are the stakes of anything? Every near death, every sacrifice, every moment of peril is undercut by a clone in a tank we are supposed to forget about. The show built an escape from death, gave it to its heroes, and then went back to pretending death is on the table whenever it needs us to be afraid. It wants the immortality for its lore, and the mortality for its drama, and it has never once reconciled the two, because the day it tells us exactly how Rick can be killed is the day his death becomes possible, and the show is not ready to make Rick's death possible. And there is a darker reading of the backups that the show only glances at. A man who cannot die does not value his life, because he has nothing to lose by risking it, and Rick risks his constantly, throws himself into danger with a recklessness that reads as bravery, and maybe something closer to a death wish that the technology keeps cheating. Remember the garage, the night with the death ray. Rick has tried to die deliberately, and the backups mean that even that exit may not be reliably available to him. The man who built immortality for himself may have built a prison, a guarantee that no matter how much he wants out, the system will keep rerouting his mind into a fresh body and some other reality and forcing him to continue. The backups were supposed to be insurance. They might be a sentence. The show has never asked Rick how he feels about being unable to fully die, and given what we know about the garage, that may be the most important question it is refusing to ask. So he stays a vampire, unkillable by any means we are allowed to know, including perhaps the ones he might choose for himself. Moving on to the city again, but not the politics of it this time. The schools, the factories, the slums, the ordinary lives lived inside the strangest society the show ever built. What is it actually like to be a Morty, and what did the Citadel raise its Mortys to become? The Citadel was not only a seat of power for Ricks, it was a functioning society, with a working class and a ruling class and everything in between. And in one remarkable episode, the show stops following our two leads entirely and just walks the streets of it, telling 4 separate stories about ordinary Citadel citizens who are not our Rick and not our Morty. It is the only episode of its kind, a complete departure, and it is one of the best the show ever made, precisely because it treats this absurd premise, a city of infinite copies of 2 people, with total sociological seriousness. It asks what the economy of such a place would look like, what the politics would be, what it would do to the ones at the bottom, and what it shows is bleak in a way the show usually keeps off screen. There is a school for Mortys, where young Mortys are processed and trained and sorted, raised from the start to be sidekicks, taught that their entire purpose is to accompany a Rick and absorb whatever a Rick needs absorbed. There are Mortys who wash out, Mortys who break, Mortys who dream of something more and are crushed for it. There is a candidate Morty running for office on hope and decency who turns out to be the same cold operator underneath. There are Ricks living in poverty, Ricks working factory jobs, Ricks who never made it, the failed remainder of a population that was supposed to be the smartest beings alive. The episode is devastating because it confirms in concrete civic detail everything evil Morty would later argue in the abstract. The Citadel is a machine for manufacturing sidekicks and disposing of the ones who do not fit. An entire educational and economic system built to take young Mortys and grind the main character out of them, to produce, on an industrial scale, exactly the compliant, anxious, expendable companion that a Rick requires. And the show showed us this whole society, this whole machinery of Morty production, and then let evil Morty blow it up, scattering its survivors, without ever telling us what happens to a population raised entirely to be sidekicks once there are no longer any Ricks to be sidekicks for. The unanswered question reaches back to our own Morty. If this is what the Citadel does to Mortys, if there is an entire civilization devoted to the proposition that a Morty is raw material for a Rick's life, then where does that leave the one we follow? Our Morty did not go through the Morty school, but he went through Rick, which may be the same curriculum delivered one-on-one. The show built an entire society to demonstrate what Mortys are for, made us watch the assembly line, and then asked us to keep watching our Morty trail after his Rick as if the assembly line had nothing to say about it. The Citadel was the show telling us, plainly, what it thinks a Morty is, and the most haunting detail is what the candidate Morty became. The episode follows a hopeful Morty, an idealist, a Morty who believes the system can be reformed, who runs for office promising decency and change, who seems for a while like the one Morty who escaped the mold, and then the reveal lands, and that hopeful Morty turns out to be the coldest operator of them all. A Morty who learned that the most effective disguise in a world built on Mortys being harmless is to be the Morty who promises he is different. It is the show telling you that even the Morty who looks like he beat the system is just the system's most advanced product, which loops straight back to our Morty, and to evil Morty, and to the whole impossible question of whether any Morty can ever actually become a person, or whether every apparent escape is just another shape the cage is allowed to take. The show raised that question on an industrial scale, with an entire civilization as its evidence, and then blew the civilization up and moved on, leaving the question standing in the rubble. It has never let our Morty learn the lesson the show taught us about him. Moving on to a problem that sits underneath the entire show like a fault line, the question of whether anything we have watched can be trusted to have happened at all. How much of Rick and Morty is real, inside its own story, and how would we ever know? Stack up what the show has told us about its own reliability. Rick can erase memories, and does, casually, with a device that wipes a moment out of a mind as cleanly as deleting a file. There is an entire episode built around this, structured as a series of disconnected adventures that turn out to be Morty's own memories, ones Rick had removed and stored in labeled jars on a shelf. Some were erased to spare Morty trauma, some were erased to spare Rick embarrassment. At least one was erased because Morty asked for it, after an adventure so unbearable he could not live with remembering it. By the end of that episode, Rick and Morty accidentally wipe so much that they have to reorient themselves using a video they left behind for exactly this purpose, because they have done this so many times that they keep an instructional message for their freshly blanked selves. Read that again. They have erased themselves often enough that they maintain a recovery protocol for it. The show told us, in one episode, that its two main characters routinely edit their own minds, and have lost count of how often. We have watched him use it on his family for trivial reasons, removing an embarrassing afternoon the way you would tidy a room. Rick can fabricate entire histories, and did, building a fake origin story so complete it fooled the audience for seasons. The show has staged whole episodes that turn out to be memories, simulations, dreams, or the warped recollections of a dying mind, each one presented at first as straight reality. It has an entire device, interdimensional cable, whose whole function is to blur the line between what is happening to the characters and what is just being watched on a screen. And it has established that the family is not even in its original reality, that the people at the table are refugees several worlds removed from where any of them started. Now ask the obvious question, given all of that, how does anyone, the characters or the audience, know which of the show's events are load-bearing reality, and which are erased, fabricated, simulated, or simply someone else's broadcast? The show has handed itself every tool it would need to retroactively unmake anything. Any episode could be revealed as a memory Rick later wiped. Any relationship could be built on a fabricated past. Any death could be undone by a clone, or revealed as a simulation. The show has not just left individual mysteries unanswered, it has left open the possibility that the ground under all of them is unstable, that the continuity we are trying to solve is itself unreliable by the show's own admitted rules. This is the deepest version of every mystery on this list, and the show flirts with it constantly without committing, because the moment it tells you, definitively, that everything you have watched is real and fixed, it loses the ability to surprise you with a reveal that it was not. And the moment it tells you that nothing is reliable, it loses your investment entirely, because why care about events that might be erased next week? So it lives in the gap. It asks you to feel everything fully while quietly reserving the right to have none of it be what it appeared. The unanswered question is not any single plot thread. It is whether the show is even the kind of story where plot threads can be answered, or whether it is a story specifically built so that the answers can always be revised, wiped, or revealed to have been someone's dream. There is one more turn of the screw here. The show has occasionally let characters express awareness that they might be inside exactly this kind of unstable, watched, possibly fictional reality. The fourth wall is thin in this show. Characters comment on episode structure, on their own narrative status, on the strange forces that seem to shape their lives, which means the unreliability is more than a tool the writers hold over the audience. It is a dread the characters themselves occasionally seem to feel, a sense that the ground might not be real, that they might be watched, that their continuity might be revised by something outside their control. In a universe with infinite realities, and a man who erases memories, and a device that turns life into television, paranoia about whether any of it is real is not madness, it is accurate. The show built a world where the sanest possible response is to suspect that none of it can be trusted, and then populated that world with characters slowly, correctly, coming to suspect exactly that. The show knows which one it is. It has decided you are better off not knowing. Before we get to the final mystery, a handful of smaller ones, the threads too short to build a whole segment around, but too sharp to leave out. First, the question of Summer. She spent the early seasons as background, the shallow teenage sister, the one the show seemed to have no plans for. And then, slowly, she revealed herself to be something none of the others are. She can go on a Rick adventure and come back intact. Where Morty gets hollowed out, where Beth gets brittle, where Jerry gets crushed, Summer adapts. She picks up a weapon and learns to use it. She handles the horror and metabolizes it into competence rather than trauma. The show has never explained why. Why is Summer the one member of the family who touches Rick's world and is hardened rather than broken by it? There are two readings, and the show refuses to choose between them. The hopeful one is that Summer is proof that a person can survive proximity to Rick, that the damage is not inevitable, that there is a way to look at the abyss the family lives in and not fall in. The darker one is that Summer is not surviving the corruption, she is simply further along in it, that her resilience is the same nihilism Rick and Morty carry, just worn more comfortably, and that we are watching a young woman become her grandfather in real time and mistaking it for strength. The show shows you the evidence for both, and lets you pick the one you can live with. Second, the matter of Jerry, the man everyone treats as a joke, including the show, including the universe itself. And underneath the joke, a recurring suggestion the show keeps making and never explains, that Jerry's uselessness is somehow a kind of power. Across realities, certain Ricks go out of their way to keep certain Jerrys alive, to protect them, even to handle them with a wariness that makes no sense if Jerry is truly just a harmless idiot. There are hints, repeated and deliberate, that a Jerry who ever got his act together would be genuinely dangerous. That something in the universe's accounting is kept balanced specifically by keeping Jerry exactly as pathetic as he is. One version of Jerry, from a reality close to the family's own, is shown to be more capable than our Jerry, able to do things our Jerry cannot, hinting that the gap between useless Jerry and dangerous Jerry is smaller than anyone wants to admit. The show plays all of it for laughs, and never once tells us whether there is a real threat sleeping under the incompetence. Whether Jerry is a man the universe pities, or a man it is quietly, carefully containing. Third, the question of the cat, which we covered but which deserves a second mention here for one reason. It is the only mystery the show created by having Rick solve it and refuse to share. Every other thread on this list is open because the writers have not answered it. The cat is open because a character answered it, on screen, and decided the audience could not handle what he found. It is the show acknowledging, directly, that some of its mysteries are not puzzles to be solved but doors that should stay shut, and trusting you to understand the difference, which most of us do not, which is why people are still trying to figure out the cat. Fourth, the oldest small mystery of all, the one the show turned into a running joke precisely because it has no answer, and never will. What is a plumbus? The show presents a full, straight-faced instructional sequence on how a plumbus is manufactured, a grotesque organic assembly line involving fleed juice and schleim and a process no human could follow, narrated with the confidence of a documentary. And at no point does it tell you what the finished object does. Everyone in that reality owns one. Everyone has always owned one. The how is explained in loving, disgusting detail. The what is never touched. It is the entire show compressed into a single gag, a perfect and elaborate answer to a question nobody asked, wrapped tight around a flat refusal to answer the one question that actually matters, which is, when you step back, the exact shape of every mystery we have walked through today. The show will always tell you how. It will almost never tell you why. Itself and nothing else are smaller than the rest, but they rhyme with the rest, which is the point. Big or small, the show works the same way every time. It builds something specific and concrete and real, shows it to you in detail, and then withholds the one piece that would let you close the loop. After 2 hours of this, you start to see it as a single technique applied at every scale, from a kitchen gadget to the structure of infinity. Now the last mystery, the one that sits underneath all the others, the one that does not have an answer because it was never meant to. What is Rick and Morty actually about? And does the show know? Strip away the portals and the aliens and the infinite realities, and look at what is left. A brilliant, broken old man who lost his wife and daughter and could not survive the loss without turning himself into a weapon. A grandson he is slowly remaking in his own damaged image, either as the family he is trying to get right this time, or as collateral in a grief he cannot process. A daughter who may be a copy, loved by a father who may be loving a ghost. A family built on a buried body, and a secret nobody will say out loud. The science fiction is the costume. Underneath it, every single mystery on this list is the same mystery wearing different masks. It is the question of whether a person who has lost everything can ever build something real again, or whether everything they build afterward is just an elaborate way of not feeling the loss. Look back at the whole list with that in mind, and watch them collapse into each other. The photograph that cannot exist, of Rick holding a grandchild during years he was supposed to be alone. The clone question hanging over Beth. The taunt that Rick himself might be a copy. The catchphrase that is secretly a cry for help. The wife he can only keep alive as a machine built to torment him. The home reality he froze on its worst day rather than let it end. The friend he rebuilt out of spare parts because he could not accept the death. The family he swaps from one reality to the next over a mispronounced word. The grandson going cold in the backyard, learning that nobody belongs anywhere. The backup bodies that mean he cannot quite die. Every one of these is the same man refusing the same thing. Refusing to let a loss be a loss. Refusing to let an ending be an ending. Refusing, with the full force of the smartest mind in the multiverse, to ever once accept that something is gone and cannot be retrieved, rebuilt, replaced, looped, cloned, or simulated back into being. That is why none of these threads resolve. They are not separate puzzles with separate solutions. They are one wound, photographed from a dozen angles, and the show cannot answer any of them definitively without answering the one underneath, which is whether Rick is going to be okay, whether any of them are, whether a life assembled on top of catastrophe can hold weight, or whether it eventually has to come down. The moment the show answers that, it stops being the thing it is, a definitive yes, and it becomes a redemption story, sentimental, finished. A definitive no, and it becomes unwatchable, a slow documentation of a man and the child he is ruining. So it holds the question open, episode after episode, year after year, the way the rest of us hold open the questions we cannot afford to answer about our own lives. The genius and the cruelty of Rick and Morty is that it makes you complicit in the avoidance. You tune in for the adventures, the jokes, the spectacle, and you keep coming back, on some level, to find out whether the man at the center is going to be alright, knowing the show can never tell you, because the day it tells you is the day it ends. So Rick keeps drinking. The photograph stays on the wall. Beth never gets her answer. The cat keeps its secret. And the smartest man in the universe, who has solved death and travel and the structure of infinity itself, sits in his garage having solved everything except the one thing that broke him, which is the only thing any of us ever actually need solved. That is the real unsolved mystery. Not who's Morty, not which Beth, not what the cat saw. It is whether the wound at the center of this show is the kind that heals, or the kind you just learn to carry. The show does not know. That is not a flaw. That is the most honest thing about it, because most of us do not know either, and we are watching a cartoon about a drunk scientist to avoid finding out. And maybe that is the only honest place to leave it. Because the show is not really withholding answers to be coy. It is withholding them because the answers do not exist. Not for Rick and not for the rest of us. There is no test that tells you whether you are the real version of yourself or a lesser draft. There is no device that tells you whether the people who love you love the person you are, or the person you are standing in for. There is no clean accounting of how many times you have started over, lost something, buried it in the yard, and walked into a new life, pretending the old one did not happen. Rick has the technology to ask all of these questions literally, with clones and portals and memory machines, and the technology does not help. He ends up exactly where everyone ends up, sitting somewhere familiar, surrounded by people he is afraid to need, drinking to keep from saying the one true thing out loud, which he has helpfully translated into a catchphrase so that he can scream it all day and never be heard. That is the show. That is the whole show. Underneath the portals, a man who solved everything except the thing that breaks everyone, and a family orbiting the gap where his answer should be, and an audience that keeps coming back to watch, telling ourselves we are here for the science fiction. If you made it to the end of all 2 hours, genuinely thank you. That is rare, and I do not take it for granted. If this gave you a new way to look at a show you thought you already knew, the best thing you can do is subscribe so the next one finds you, and leave a comment telling me which mystery you think actually has an answer the writers are sitting on, because the comment section on these turns into its own investigation, and it is the best part. If there is a show you want taken apart like this, a cartoon you have always suspected was hiding something underneath the jokes, put the name in the comments and I will go digging. There are more shows, more buried threads, more questions sitting in plain sight, waiting for someone to actually stop and ask them. I will keep pulling them up if you keep watching. Until the next one.